Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Get Real with Jack and Cindy. I'm Cindy Morrison.
And I'm Jack Wallace. Welcome. We're so glad you're here.
Yeah. Hey, we have a new sign. If you're watching us on YouTube, we look really official now. I guess season 2, we needed to up our ante a little bit.
Yeah. In case you all forget who we are, we wanted to make sure. So
yeah, I know.
Yeah.
So Crazy Neon, we love. Love
we
the
do.
new sign.
We're so excited. So back on track.
Yeah. What were we talking about today?
Yeah.
Different things to negotiate.
Yeah. When I think that this is an important subject, I think, we're in this kind of weird where things are going in an interesting direction. Like things are really busy and then they're really slow and then they're really busy. And I think they're all related to the interest rate.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it seems like anytime the interest rate ticks a little bit down, then things start picking back up. It ticks up a little bit, they slow back down. So that tells you right there that people are very, very interest rate sensitive right now.
Mm-hmm.
So I think one of the things we need to discuss is having somebody on your team, first of all, that knows how to do this well is important.
Who does it every day.
Yeah. But that everyone thinks of negotiation as just getting the lowest bottom price.
Mm-hmm.
And that's really not the best thing to always be thinking about, because you really have to think about how you're going to own the property. That's, I think, and that's one thing I've been really focusing a lot on social media stuff, is I feel like we talk a lot about how to sell, a lot about how to buy,
mm-hmm.
but we don't talk a lot about how to own it.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. And so as far as the owning it goes, what is your monthly going to be? Because that's really what people care about. So one of the first things I think we should talk about is if I go in and ask for, let's say, a $10,000 reduction in price. Well, that's great. I mean, it is great. You got 10,000 off and everybody feels really good, right? Because now we got 10,000 off.
Well, the buyers feel good. Yeah. Sellers are like, I'm missing $10,000.
Well, but I mean, I think that they got it sold and they were probably anticipating they were going to have to negotiate. So I don't think, so let's just assume that. Let's assume that this is a win-win for everybody, that,
I love that scenario.
Yeah, and that they're happy with that.
Yeah.
So assuming that, then, okay, Mr. and Mrs. Buyer, or Mr. Buyer or Mrs. Buyer, whatever, you now are probably going to get about $60 off of your monthly payment. Mm-hmm. But if you had done a $10,000 buy down on something, then it'd be like
buy down an interest
rate, then you'd be more like a $250 a month savings.
Repeat that again, just in case somebody missed it.
I'm going off of math on something. I don't remember the exact numbers, but I just ran this recently, and it came out that it was $60 a month less for the principal and interest payment for taking $10,000 off the price, and then it was $250 for taking a 1% increase by buying it for $10,000.
Wow. So, I mean, that's significant.
And it is. And so you look at that, about a $200, let's say, that's $2,400. So, in 4 or 5 years, then you've gotten that 10,000 off, right? And then from then on, it's gravy. So the other thing that's good about that is, if you're going to sell it down the road, which you probably are, then you have the higher price showing. You've kept the comp in the neighborhood at the higher price. So you're not dragging comps down in your own neighborhood. You're not trying to show people, well, I should get this, because people don't look at it and say, well, you got 10,000 in something, so I'm going to off, but I know that you really meant to pay 200,000, let's say. So it's really important that you think about that, because when people are looking back, everybody wants to look back at what they paid for something.
Yep.
So if you paid the 200,000, but you got 10,000 in other things, they just really see the 200,000. But if you got it for 190, suddenly they've got a 10,000 in their mind that you're getting extra from them.
Right. Right.
So I think it's a good play both ways.
And I always talk with the lender and say, okay, what are the different scenarios for whatever loan that they're getting? Is it better to buy down a point? Is it better to ask for closing costs? They're going to have that bigger financial picture.
They really are.
And for each person and each situation, it can be very, very different. So don't try to play lender if you're the real estate agent. Make sure you have a great team around you to help you figure that out.
But know the options.
Yes.
That's the thing. I think you need to be professional enough, because the lender is basically going to say, yeah, go. And then you negotiate. The lender's not in the negotiation typically. So we may want to pull the lender into the negotiation and say, hey, what do we need to do here? Because let's say they're right on the bubble of qualifying. And so, that may make a difference in how you look at things and what they can qualify for. Because again, if you get that 10,000 off, but they get it in some kind of an allowance, then the appraisal is suddenly 190 instead of 200, let's say, in that scenario, which in that price point could make a huge difference.
Yeah.
I mean, so I think there's so many aspects of that, but then there are other things too. It's like, it's so expensive right now to buy a property for so many people, and they're already kind of strapped with their money. So, and let me go back one little bit.
Okay.
So as the seller, I think it's also really important that you understand, we've talked about this before, but I want to keep saying it, get over your expectations of how that money is going to go. It's so important that you not think in terms of, I'm not going to pay for this, but yet you would take that off the price.
Right.
You've really got to realize.
And you hear that a lot.
You do. It's surprising how much people feel like they're giving something, which to me is kind of counterintuitive. To me, I'd be like, I'm giving something when I'm taking money off my price more than, psychologically than I do if I'm giving them that. But, everyone's different. But that is something that I see people messing up on all the time. And that's also where, as agents, if you're out there listening, fight for that and explain the bottom line, because they really have to worry about their bottom line, both for taxation and just basically what they're going to put in their checking account.
And we're seeing a lot more of those concessions coming back into the market that we didn't see for a number of years during and after COVID. And, when it comes to those concessions, a lot of the buyers, as you're saying, just don't have the cash.
They don't.
To close on that down payment. Sure, they can qualify for the loan, but they're strapped as it is. So if you can give them a seller concession to at least help or cover those closing costs instead of going down on the price, you're also helping them make it a win-win for everybody, because now they don't have to be stressed about coming up with $10,000 or $8,000 or whatever it is. So, because they've already had to come up with their down payment.
Right. And I think that's the most important thing, is that you really have to focus on, how do we get the deal done? How do we get the deal done so that everybody wins? Because listen, if they can't make it work, they're not going to buy your property. And so then you really don't want that. You want to sell your property. So we have to get creative sometimes and stay within the letter of the law and do all that. But at the same time, everyone just focuses so much on, I want to get this price, or I want to get it for this price, that they're not seeing the big picture strategy of that. So
and on pricing, I feel like because everything increased, 3 to 5% over the last few years, it's been flat or a little up over the last year, but people sort of have not just an inflated price, but an inflated idea in their mind of what that house is worth. And I'm not going to take less than that. Well, you've gone up a whole lot more than 3 to 5% a year in your mind, in your equation.
Yeah.
So, listing your house at the price where everybody wins, the buyer gets it for a good price. The seller got a good price for their home. Everybody's a win-win in that. So, overpricing and like you said,
and no one likes to leave money on the table.
No,
no. It isn't like we're saying discount your property. It's not that. It is not about discounting your property.
It's pricing it right.
We as realtors, professional, good realtors, are not really looking to get people to come so low that their property flies off the shelf because it was such a deal. What you want to do is find the sweet spot that people feel like, yeah, that's worth it, but I can do that and I'm not going to get stuck with it. And what you were saying, the other thing I think a lot of times that people are doing is they're focusing so much on what other people have listed their houses for. And if somebody listed their house for really high and then over 2 years ended up taking a lot lower, that is not a comp that you can go to that first listing. So like you went to the first open house and the house was really greatly priced in your mind as a person who lives 2 doors down.
Right.
But then it took a year to sell and they took a lot less, but you're still fixated on what they asked.
Mhm.
So it's kind of like we talked about this estimate, and like
Mhm.
it's the psychology as a seller. You have to think like a buyer. I mean, you have to think like a buyer, and as a buyer, you have to think like a seller. I mean, that is really we're looking at it from those standpoints. I mean, like if you're buying a house as your realtor, I'm thinking about when you come back to me in 2 years and want to sell it, I want to make sure you didn't do something that I'm going to have to go, I'm sorry, that was a bad purchase, like
You're upside down, and nobody ever wants to hear that.
yeah, and stuff happens and people make decisions, and that's okay. But it's like my job is to try to at least give you an idea of, well, you may be in trouble here. You may have a problem if you're not going to stay forever. I had a client a long time ago that not that long ago. I shouldn't say that long ago. But anyways, they were building a house, a custom house, and I was helping them, and I was representing both sides, the builder and them. And they called and said, we have found light fixtures at Restoration Hardware, and they were a lot of money. I mean, a lot of money. And this was a nice house, but it was like a 450, 500 back then, which is probably like a 700, 800 now. I was like, guys, I don't mean to be your dad, but if you decide you want to sell this in 2 years, you are not getting that money back. Like, you are really going to be, up the creek. And he said, oh, Jack, we're going to be here forever. This is our forever home. And I said, you know what? People think that.
How
and
many
I feel
times
that way.
do we hear that?
And I hope that that's the case, that that's what you want. But I just, just so we're clear, I made you aware of, this, because it was like we had to redo structural stuff inside the ceiling so that it could support these heavy chandeliers and stuff. So about 8 months later, I get a call, and it's from, he goes, hey, Dad. They got a job somewhere and they were moving, and we did end up getting what they had put in it. I mean, but it was a lucky draw, and it worked out. And those people have stayed in the house for a long time, so they got their money out of it, which I also felt good about, because you also have to think about that too.
Yeah.
But my point is, you have to make decisions and you have to do the best you can, but at the same time, you are human. You're going to do some things that are good choices and some things that are bad choices, right?
Right.
But if you're buying, think about when you're going to sell. And if you're selling, think about what that buyer is going to be looking at in your house if you were the buyer.
Mm-hmm. And sometimes when, particularly sellers, when they draw that line in the sand of, I'm not going to do this, I'm not going to do that, I honestly ask them, do you really want to sell your house? Are you serious about it? Or are you waiting for a unicorn to come along and then you'll sell?
Well, my question is always, what is your bottom line then?
Mm-hmm.
Like, once we're getting to negotiate, I'm like, what is your bottom line? Because that is the number that we have to work with. If you say you're not going to do this, you're not going to do that. Well, if doing this and doing that still gets your bottom line where you want it to be, you should do it. Mm-hmm. If it compromises your bottom line and that bottom line is realistic, then okay, we might not do that. But making decisions based on they should be able to, or I don't like that they,
and we hear it all the time.
And we hear it a lot. And it's almost kind of like a bit of it's kind of like almost someone saying they don't have enough money to buy my house when they're trying to do that. But that isn't the case.
Right.
That is strategy. Mm-hmm. So that's the first one. I think that people should pay more attention to negotiating on that concession and getting that buy down. And for a while we were doing 3-2-1. I still think 3-2-1, which is when you get 3% off, 2% off, and 1% off. First year 3%, second year 2%, the next year 1%, and then it goes back to whatever the rate is. So let's say it was a 7 interest rate, it would go 4, 5, 6, and then go back to 7. Mm-hmm. So that strategy is okay if you're going to be in the house for a short period of time. Like, let's say you're going to be there for 3 or 4 years. If you're somebody who moves, some people move constantly. We love you.
Yes, we do.
Some people do that. And if you're going to do that, then it's a really good strategy. Mm-hmm. But I've done the numbers, I've really crunched it. And if you're not, and you're going to be there more than 10 years or around 10 years to 15 years, then you're better off to do a 1% permanent buy down. Mm-hmm. So that's where you have to get into, what do we think realistically we're going to do? And what do you really do? Because the truth is that first couple of years or first 5 years of you're basically just paying interest. Mm-hmm. You really are. You're just barely chipping away at the principal. So to do the most you can in the beginning makes sense if you're going to do it for a shorter period of time.
And not all the concessions are money oriented.
Right.
There are, I know as an agent, one of the most important things I can do is be friends or friendly with the other agent, because we both want the same thing. We both want to make our clients happy. So I will often ask them, if I have the buyer, what else are your sellers interested in? And you'll be amazed, if you don't have this adversarial relationship, that, well, hey, if your people need 30 days, or 45 days, they need longer, and they want to do a lease back. Or
well, let's run through the scenarios of that, because that sounds kind of like the scenario if someone's building a house, but it's not going to be done for 45 to 60 days. And the people buying it say, we can wait. We don't have a house to sell. That would be really attractive to those people compared to someone who wants a 30-day and then they've got to move twice.
Right.
I mean, then you have the moving expense twice. You've got to stay somewhere else. I mean, like that. So suddenly that 45 to 60-day flexibility is a huge, wonderful negotiation tool for that buyer that has that information, and a win-win again for that seller. The other thing is, let's say there's some kind of a probate or there's something going on and someone says, I'm willing to wait till you get through that. I can wait. I'm not in a hurry. That would be a very appealing thing to a lot of sellers. In fact, it might not just be appealing, and maybe the only way they can do it.
Right.
So those scenarios come up more than you think. And people have just, I mean, people are in, sometimes people put their people, sometimes people put their house on the market. That is a tongue twister. Sometimes people put their house on the market.
With pickled peppers.
With pickled peppers. Sometimes they put their house on the market earlier than they should because they think it's going to take longer. And then they're trapped because somebody is ready to go and they can't.
Right.
So that negotiation can be very, very, very useful.
We even had an instance where, if somebody puts in an offer on a house that's contingent on their house selling and it's not under contract, then the seller's house stays on the market but contingent, so people know that there is an offer just waiting for the buyer's house to get under contract. And I'm used to that house has to go on the market, within 24, 48 hours. I think it's 48 hours. And we had an instance where it worked out great for both sides. They needed an extra 2 weeks before they could get their home on the market. So of course I checked with my broker because I'd never done that before. And yes, if it's written into the contract and everybody agrees, and it worked out great because the buyers felt comfortable putting in the offer, then getting their home ready, getting it on the market. And my sellers were not in a hurry. They were like, hey, if you like the house, we want you to have the house.
Yeah. And that works out well sometimes. Sometimes not so well.
But contingencies are
very interesting.
They're back.
It is interesting. I just think the one thing you have to think about with that, and that's where as a buyer, you have to think like a seller, because a lot of people are like, I don't want to have to worry about getting my house sold. So well, but then you're also asking that seller to be risking whether or not your house sells and on their timeline. And then they've got to jump through your hoop when that happens. So it's a unique situation sometimes where that really works out for everybody. And like some people are like, I hate having my house listed. I hate, I'd rather do that. Or they think, well, we can still show it and it can still be, and then they have a kick out clause, which is when the kick out clause means that the buyer, if the house gets a good acceptable offer the seller wants to take, that they go back to the buyer and say, if you want to go ahead and do it, you've got 48 hours to figure out how to go ahead and buy the house. Now, the problem I run into with that is that oftentimes the other buyers don't want to wait the 48 hours for you to say whether or not they really have the option to buy that house. So you really have to be careful on that, because
and it's 24 hours on, because I've
had 24 or 48, depending on the kick out clause.
Yeah. I've had several contingencies this year, which I haven't had one since 2019.
I would suggest 24 because that's fair to the new buyer.
Exactly. Because, they may be in a time crunch to find a house. But both of them, they were homes that had sat for a little while, got in the contingent offer, And almost within a few days, we got another offer.
Yeah.
And they had to decide, are they going to take that contingency off and buy it without their house selling, or it sells or not?
Yeah.
Or are they going to back out of the contract? It does not mean, as one of my sellers kept trying to tell me, oh, well, if a higher offer comes in, I'll take that. No, you're under contract right now.
And that is
You can-
heartbreaking, because sometimes
Mhm.
the higher offer comes in, but the other people go ahead and option to buy the house for what they agreed to, and you have a contract with them. So
Mhm.
again, good, bad, indifferent. There's good things about it, there's bad things about it, and it can, and I will say that I've had that happen before, and then the person was very non-negotiable on repairs, because they were like, I have a better offer, and then they end up losing that deal, and then those other people had moved on to another house, and then so you have to be really careful how you play all that and get too cocky. It's easy to go down that path.
And I always, so this is something I do as let me think which agent I'm going to be. So let me explain it. I'll always ask, as the buying agent, I'll always ask before I turn in the TRR, just asking if you have any backup offers. Because that's how I got my house. We were the backup offer. Ours was higher than
TRR stuff.
The original, and they ended up getting out of the first contract because the people wanted a new roof, and they're like, nope, sorry. So I've learned to ask, because then if I know they have a backup offer, then let's be a little more conservative.
Something that's a required disclosure. Yeah. So I mean,
and at TRRs, treatment, repair, and replace. So you have in Oklahoma 10 days for your inspections as the buyer, and then you can back out, and if you find out there's a crack in the foundation or whatever, and then you have 7 days to negotiate for the seller to be able to get an idea of how much those repairs are going to cost and negotiate. If you can't come up with a solution in that amount of time, then you can break up the contract. But I always now ask that, because I want to know, are we the only horse?
That's a great idea.
Well, thank you.
Great, yeah.
Are we the only horse in the race?
Yeah.
Although sometimes when I've asked it, they're like, what, is something wrong? I'm like, nothing's wrong. I'm just curious. If there's a lady in waiting sitting in the other room, I want to know.
But if you tell another agent that you have a backup offer, you better actually have a backup offer, and it be good. Yeah. I mean, it's like that game sometimes gets a little bit weird with, doesn't
just
it?
Always be honest. I mean, you can't you can't divulge anything that is confidential information, but if you just are honest about things, and don't, multiple offers are coming in. And I've actually had buyers that a house has sat there, and all of a sudden we got 3 offers. And
it's crazy. And people think you're lying.
Yeah.
It's like,
he did.
I know this house has been on the market for 168 days, but I just got yours and 2 other offers in. And I mean, it's almost like the same buyers are kind of hovering for the same reason at the same time when it happens. Like the interest rates went down just enough that demographic now has been freed up, and so they're all ready to go. It's weird, but it does. It happens all the time, and you kind of can't believe it yourself when it's going. You're like, this one, really? Okay.
Yeah, I called for everybody to bring highest and best, and one of these buyers was like, "You're lying. There aren't really multiple offers," and I'm like, "Okay."
Yeah, and some people don't want to do that, and I understand that.
But he didn't do it because he thought I was not telling the truth.
I mean, it's a real interesting thing with that whole thing with divulging that there's other offers, and they're going to consider highest and best. Is like you'll have people drop out because they either don't believe you, or they don't want to be in that rust, like that game.
Yes.
So yeah, it's interesting. So we talked about the contingencies on the interest rate. We've talked about closing day. We're talking a little bit about repairs. One thing that's really interesting right now, I think, kind of related to repairs, and we'll cover this in another podcast too, but we just had tremendous amount of bad weather and hail and wind and all that. So the one thing that you really should be focusing on right now too is make sure you can get a roofing inspection on what you're buying. And as a seller, be prepared to negotiate using your insurance to replace the roof, and you either paying the deductible or splitting the deductible, or something. But as a buyer, you might want to ask, do you have full replacement insurance? Like, if we can get this covered, can we do that? Because a lot of times the seller's like, I don't care. I mean,
Right.
if it can be done and then you get a new roof, then everybody wins. So, and then suddenly that buyer can get full replacement when they buy the house. They have a new roof and they reset the clock at no real expense to anybody. But the problem too is that if you buy that house, it has hail damage from a storm that happened this month, and then you're the new buyer, then the insurance really has to go back on that first. I mean, it gets messy. And so it's better to kind of deal with that now.
Well, and I think I've replaced, not myself, but my sellers or the buyers and sellers have split the cost, new roofs this year in particular.
Yeah.
And not necessarily because of the weather, but more and more insurance companies are not insuring older roofs.
Yeah.
It is a thing.
And you don't want to get caught in that where you just assume that it's going to be covered by your insurance and buy the house and then have a hard time. I mean, you can find someone to insure it, but you'll pay for it and you'll get, you can get minimum coverage. So
I encourage my buyers to do that earlier rather than later.
Hard to get
Don't wait till the last minute.
It's hard to get an insurance people to look at your roof. Like you need roofing companies that will go do the inspection for you and reputable. So they're not just, looking for work. And I've got some people I really like, but I think that's really, I'm having them look at my house tomorrow because I went home the other day from the office and they closed our offices with that one. And it was like huge rocks were just being thrown at my house. My dogs were like up on like every part. I'm like, I know, I'm scared too. It's scary. Yeah. So those are the things you really just kind of like what's happened recently. Have they had, that's a question you can ask. Did you have an insurance company evaluate after that storm? Because if there was a hailstorm like a week ago, that's a very fair question. Did you call your insurance person or somebody to check out this roof? And they may have, and then you don't have to have the inspection. You can look at whatever that was, what was done.
And be reasonable during TRR. Again, do you really want the house? Do you really want to sell it? Because it's amazing how many times I sold their house, then helped them buy a house. Sold their house. We are not doing any repairs. No repairs. But then when they're the buyer, they want $5,000 in repairs.
Yes. And let's talk about this. So the one concession that I really think is overused is as is. And let me tell you why. I believe in as is. I had a dad who was an as is buyer and that was his, because he wanted to take care of stuff. Sometimes to his detriment, I would say that. And you agree, Mom, you're watching or listening. I know, but
thanks, Mom.
But it was the roll of the dice, and he was willing to take that, but he understood that. Now, what I don't like is people will say as is, and realtors are really bad about throwing that around in negotiations, having their buyer say, yeah, I'll take it as is, but not really explaining what that means. And then when they have inspections, they find 2 or 3 small things and they're like, I want all that fixed. That's really disingenuous because you said as is. Now, let's say they did their inspections, which they have a right to do, and they find a crack in the slab. Okay, yeah, that's why you have inspections, and you still have the right in Oklahoma to have inspections even as is. But if you don't like the fact that some of the doors are hung wonky or that there's a drip in the faucet, that's wrong. I mean, you said as is, and the seller made their decision based on that and probably took less money because they're going to sell it as is, or didn't take other options or other things because it was as is. So I think we need to be getting more honorable about really saying what that is, or understanding. I always say to my sellers, they're saying as is, we'll play that card, but you just got to be prepared because it almost never comes as is.
Well, and the house, tell me if I'm wrong about this, the house really as is anyway. You do your inspections to find out what's wrong, and you are asking for those things to be repaired. Do you understand what I'm saying?
I hear what you're saying, but the concept of as is on a real estate contract is just that I'm taking it where it is as it is, meaning I'm going to take the gamble. I'm going to fix whatever needs to be fixed, which in some ways I feel like we should be better about the seller doing or the buyer doing their own repairs because they have control of it and they know what they want to have done. I think that a lot of buyers don't feel comfortable with taking the gamble of what if it ends up being more than, I mean, so
Right.
there's sides to that. There's arguments to both sides of that. But
even if so let's say somebody says as is. Well, clearly, if there's a slab leak,
that's a problem.
That's a big deal.
I think they're assuming as is. Looking at okay, let's go from this standpoint. I know what you're saying now. If the disclosures say there's nothing wrong and you buy it as is, you have assumed, like, let's say that they say they think the roof is approximately 5 years old. Well, then you get in there and somebody comes and says, this is a 20-year-old roof. Well, your as is assumption was on a 10-year roof or a 5-year roof, not a 20-year roof, because of the disclosures. So if it says, is there any issues with the slab or with the plumbing, and they say no, and then you find out there's a major leak, then you bought it as is, assuming that those weren't issues. So that's why the inspection comes in, because
inspection is
make sure the disclosures match up to the reality.
Yes. And even if you go with the as is, and I'm not planning to nickel and dime the seller, but you get in there and there is something major, and hopefully the seller would fix it, because now they know about it and will have to disclose it to any future buyer.
And so that is a huge one. If you're a seller, you need to know that, like, if something major, and it can get blurry, but if you've got a major issue that was found and you play hardball with them, then you're going to have to disclose that. So then suddenly you have negotiated a price with them based on them not thinking there was that problem. Then you've got the expense to fix that problem. But now you're going to put it back on the market, and you're going to have a house that you're going to have to negotiate the price based on it already having that problem, and probably have to negotiate or pay for the repair anyway. So
generally,
you need to really think that through.
Yeah. So during the inspection, you find something big. That's what, if I'm the buyer's agent, I talk with the seller's agent and say, they're going to have to disclose this. They're going to have to fix it. We're supposed to close in 20 days. Wouldn't they rather go ahead and fix it, or we come up with a solution to this? Because they're going to have to do it anyway, and chances are they're going to pay for it on their own, and who knows how long their house will sit on the market. But also, if the seller still says nope, crosses his arms, says I'm not doing it, guess what? You have, as the buyer, those 10 days to say, I'm not buying the house. I'm out. I want my earnest money back.
Yeah.
So, keep that in mind. But I have used.
I mean, you still are out the inspection, the cost of the inspections, and people get upset about that. But let me tell you, that is the best money you ever spend, because you are not buying that problem. That's really, you spend that money so you don't, spend $1,000 in inspections so you don't buy a $50,000 problem that you weren't aware of. I mean, I think it's kind of funny too. It's like people are almost disappointed when they don't find anything in the inspections. It's like, well, this is a solid house, so that was also good to know that. And the other side of it is, people will say, well, I'll buy a new construction because then I have a 1-year warranty, which is good. That's great. And I sell new construction, and I think there's a lot of good things. But basically, that 1-year warranty is just a 1-year manufacturer's warranty. So there's some good things about new houses. There's some bad things about new houses. There's some good things about secondary. The one thing that's nice is you have all new everything, right? So new roof, new HVAC, blah, blah, blah. But if something wasn't installed correctly, or you had and it shows that first year, you're covered, right? But basically, very little shows up in that first year typically, because it's all new stuff. So a secondary house that's been well maintained and you have a history of it can be just as good, but you really need to have a good inspection. And there's things too, like people now are buying flip houses that have been done by people who probably shouldn't have done flip houses.
Oh, and you can tell almost immediately when you walk in.
Well, unfortunately not, Cindy. I mean, sometimes you walk in and it looks amazing, right? Because they've put in all new wallpaper and paint, and they've done the granite, and everything is so beautiful and trendy. And then you realize they've done absolutely nothing to the plumbing. They've done no upgrades to the electric. They've done, and so you have inspections, and they're like, it's sexy, but it is they have shined an apple that is rotten to the core.
Mhm.
Right. And so then the people are so in love with it because they love all this stuff. I've had people go, I'm going to buy it anyways. I'm like, okay. And then they get in, they just problem after problem after problem.
Right.
So, and, you know, and also sometimes the flipper buys it. They haven't no knowledge of the house. They do that stuff. They don't know that they're passing something along. I mean, it's not like it's something that
Sure.
they've done. And then suddenly we have an issue down the road. But, you know, there's a thing in Oklahoma, anywhere, buyer beware.
Yes.
And that's, you know, in real estate, we say buyer beware. And that's what the inspections are, to help you to not have to be as worried about what you could be buying into.
Mhm.
But, you know, it's important because when you sign, and when you're at closing and you sign, there's a document that you say, I accept the house in its as is condition at this moment in time. And your insurance, I mean, to this extent, if the lightning strikes your house the minute before you sign, it's the seller's. If it's the minute after you sign, it's your insurance. I mean, it is that specific to, like, the pin signing is when that changes.
One of my first deals, it had a pool. They did all of the inspections, including the pool inspection. Buyers move in. I had the sellers, and I got a call that they were super upset because the pool pump didn't work.
Right.
But they did their inspections, and you have the chance to do that walkthrough and double check everything. So there was nothing that could be done.
And we'll do all this on our next podcast, because I think we should really
after.
cover this on our next one. And the one thing too, like what I think is really important about this, what we're talking about, is that all those concessions you make at the beginning and those things, you need to be thinking in terms of, we've got that round, that's round one, ding, ding, ding. Round two is when you get into inspections and agreeing to what you're going to fix. And then once that is done, then like the earnest money becomes non-refundable, those things. But you have to get through that. Like I even tell people, your house is not sold until we get through inspections and everybody agrees to everything.
Signs.
And really, even then, it's a little blurry because, you know, sometimes like the solutions to what is found and agreed upon can be very different once you get people actually in there doing stuff. So, I mean, that negotiation sometimes and oftentimes goes on till the very last minute.
Yeah, until that, you know, the sellers sign. Until the buyers sign. Sellers a lot of times will pre-sign. And then, but the buyers have to have that wet signature on there. And if they don't sign that day, you're not closing. So,
and they have the right to do a final walkthrough. And if they're not happy with what's been done, and, you know, it can be, so it puts the seller at a lot of, you know, I know where it is buyer beware and we try to protect the consumer for that, but it does put the seller at a lot of liability for, and that's why I sometimes wonder if we should just agree to a price reduction or a credit. You know, I know a lot of lenders don't like that, and I understand that because they want the issues fixed on the houses they're lending on. But I mean, for little things, then it can be a really good way to do that. Like you can change to buying closing points or buy down points or closing costs or something like that in lieu of repair. But you have to really be specific how you do that.
Exactly. And, you know, just remember, if you are Tim the Toolman Taylor, or you don't mind, you know that as a homeowner, you're going to have some expenses. It can also be a great negotiating tool not to turn in the plug on the back porch isn't working, call out an electrician for that. And there are 10 itty bitty things that honestly a handyman could come in, or handy woman could come in and fix inexpensively and quickly, and you're not ticking off the seller. I think that's a great negotiating, that you're probably not going to ask for anything unless it's major. And then you may back out because it's so major.
And this goes back to, in this conversation, I think that's important.
I'm bringing us back around.
We're going to go into that next time. We planned on that. So we're jumping ahead. But the thing that I will say is that what we're talking about is how frustrating it is, because the decisions that sellers make at the beginning, and buyers too, is based on that everything's going to be sunshine and lollipops and unicorns. And then when it's not, they feel like they got ripped off because, well, already gave up all this and now I've got to do this. But in fairness, the buyer's like, I had no idea all this was a problem when I gave you that price. And now I got to deal with this issue and we need to make it work. So you get into a very adversarial relationship from that from that happening. So, all concessions you'd agreed to in the beginning, you need to be remembering you still have another hurdle you got to get over. Because I think we sometimes as professionals worry so much about getting the deal done in the beginning that we don't really focus on. Now, remember, this is an older house, or the other side of it too is, look, if you don't, like, people that maintain their home beautifully, I feel like sometimes get punished.
Oh yeah, for
and
sure.
that's not fair because they have done everything they can to keep it up. And then the people who do nothing and then they end up getting away with stuff. I'm like, it shouldn't be that way. I mean, it really shouldn't. If you have you've spent no money, like I've had people that have spent no money on their house in their life of living there. And they just are completely inflexible about doing any kind of repairs. I'm like, okay, just because these repairs are not important to you and you've lived like this, no one else was going to do that.
And deferred,
unless you want to take the price way down, which
and
they never
deferred
want
maintenance
to.
will drop the price of your home. Quick.
Take care of your house.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the other thing too.
Wood rot.
Yeah.
Wood rot.
All that. Well, I think we've covered a lot.
Okay. So in negotiations, it can be when you close, how quickly, how slowly. You could ask for closing costs.
Yep.
You could ask for money for buy down points. You can maybe say, I'm not going to do any repairs or not ask for any repairs unless they're major. Anything else? Yeah.
And then also, like, you could even agree to if they have a closing company that they're using and that would be, everything would go smoother and to get done faster. I mean, there's a lot of different things you could do, but those are the big ones. I think those are the really, when you're going to do it, how long you're willing to wait, or how quickly you can get, cash.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, that's a big
cash
one.
is king.
So why is cash king? It's kind of a joke because a lot of times people overemphasize cash. And to a lot of people, it's like, I don't care where the money comes from. I care how much money I get. And that's a very fair argument. Like, I'm going to give you, this drives me crazy. I'm going to give you $20 for that $100 house. But it's cash. And then someone else is going to give you $80. And the people that are going to give you 20 are pissed off because they're like, well, but I offer cash. I'm like, yeah, but it was not enough. I mean, the bottom line for the seller, if a bank's giving me the money or you're giving me the money, I don't care.
Right.
I mean, now if I have a problematic house or it's like going to be a fast deal and I don't have to worry about an appraisal. Yeah, there's great things about cash. There are some really good things about cash.
And there's always a chance that even though somebody's pre-approved, they may not actually end up being able to get the loan.
So cash can be, it can be much easier. I understand that it can be a wonderful thing to use as your negotiation. Don't get me wrong, but don't overemphasize or overthink that. You can go in and just lowball somebody and they're going to take it because you're doing cash. And typically the people who do that are also, they act like that at the beginning, but then they go in and just tear a house apart and want more. I mean, it's like, haven't you seen that over time?
Oh, yeah.
So it's like, they kind of come in and go, oh, well, I'll give it to you, but you don't have to worry about anything. Well, I didn't know that the doorknob needed new screws. Like, okay.
I want to say it's all right. I'll just send my
you're financing, and then like whether and also like whether it's FHA or conventional, that can be a big thing because if it's FHA, there may be higher standards, so yeah, all those things, the financing part too.
Well, good. I think we covered a lot.
Awesome.
Hopefully we'll save you some money on buying a house or make you more money when you sell your house.
Awesome.
All right. Thank you guys. We'll see you next week.